All right, so I will call to order this meeting of the Greenfield Conservation Commission at 6:34 p.m. on March 22nd, 2022. At the beginning of the meeting, all commission members are currently present. Just to note that this meeting is being held virtually, and if any technical interruption occurs and the meeting suddenly ends, it will not be resumed tonight, and all items will be automatically continued to the next scheduled meeting date. Also, this meeting is being recorded, as you just heard, and if anyone else is recording the meeting, you are required to let me know now or when you begin recording. Okay, I do not hear anyone recording. So the first item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes, March 8th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
A second.
Okay, motion by Fletcher, seconded by Rachel to accept the minutes. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? One thing that I was thinking to add, just for clarification, when it said that we were going to postpone, I don't actually have it open in front of me right now. It said we were going to postpone the discussion. Sorry, give me 1 second. Motion made by Travis Drury to postpone the discussion of the request for determination of applicability at 184 Shelburne Road. Maybe just for clarification, put until after the discussion on the Stone Ridge Lane property, just so it kind of keeps, that way we'll know what the order was.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll clarify that.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, not hearing any other comments. We can vote on the motion. All opposed to approving the minutes? All abstaining? Okay, then that motion passes unanimously. And just going in order, the next item on the agenda is Griswold trail maintenance. I don't think there's much to talk about there other than I can let everyone know that I did reach out to Lincoln Fish and reminded him about our upcoming site visit. And he said he's looking forward to that. And he's also going to bring, I believe he said it was his brother who has done trail maintenance work in the past. So he'll be able to provide some insights as well. Did anyone else have any updates regarding that item on the agenda? All right, well, moving along then. Next on the agenda is preliminary plans for redevelopment of the Candlelight Inn property. I believe there's probably someone here who can introduce us to this. Sounds like Matt.
Hi, my name is Gene Crouch. I'm trying to turn my camera on.
Okay.
And I'm a senior environmental scientist with Van Essing and Bruslin.
Mhm.
And with me tonight is Matt Oates, is representing Benderson Development, who is the owner of the property, and Amanda Bazinet, who is the project engineer for the project. And if I can share my screen, we sent a letter that had some figures attached to it, and I can share those and use that for my discussion.
Yep, sounds good. You should be able to share.
Okay, can you see me okay there?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is the site. It's off of Mohawk Trail, Route 2, runs through here. And Robbins Road is a side road off of Route 2 right here. Okay, so, and it's a piece of property that has frontage on Route 2, but it's kind of in the back behind McDonald's and some other stores over here, which include, I believe it's a Pella window dealer. I'm not sure if you're familiar driving by. You certainly probably know where McDonald's is in town. Like, so this is. Oh, let me go back one. Sorry. This is the original Candlelight Inn development. It had these kind of long buildings. The rooms had parking and had a pool, parking in front of the buildings for the guests. And through the property runs Smead Brook, which flows in this direction. And then there was some wetlands around it. And just so you to follow along, I've added or highlighted, this is the 200-foot riverfront area offset from the brook. This would be the 100-foot buffer zone and 100-foot riverfront area, which would continue down here. And then this green line would represent the 25-foot no disturb. And then this would be also the buffer zone line as well, the 100-foot buffer zone. This represents the pre-2015 existing conditions. So this is when the buildings were there. Pretty much the motel was not very active at the time when I was first out there, but the buildings were all there and the parking and the pavement and the pool and all that was still there. The owner, after Benderson purchased the property, it sat for a while, and apparently there was some issues with people using the site, and the town requested that the buildings be knocked down, which Benderson did. So all the buildings were knocked down, and at the time I had advised that Benderson don't pull up the pavement, don't pull up the foundations, because a lot of the property is in riverfront area, and we want to make sure we maintain credit for that when you do want to redevelop the site. But the town did require the pavement be removed and that the foundations be removed. So that was obviously has changed the character of the site, and also as it stands from a regulatory perspective on the Wetlands Protection Act. Now, I want to make a note that there is some maintained parking over in this area, which is used by McDonald's, and there's an agreement with McDonald's for them to have this access. So this is, I believe it's all gravel parking over here, maybe some paved parking, but that is definitely within riverfront, comes very close to the brook as well at that location. So the plan Benderson has is to redevelop the property, and this is a potential supermarket store or market store. It would include new parking, obviously using the main access off of Route 2, and then here's the building itself with truck access to the back. There would be access to Robbins Road on the side, so trucks could get in and out of here easily that way, or down through Route 2 to Route 2 directly. The development has pulled out of the riverfront as much as we can. Obviously, there's a lot of riverfront on the project site. We're able to stay out of the 25-foot no disturb completely. But needless to say, we are within riverfront area on a fair amount of the project site. So since the town was the one that required that the buildings and the pavement and such be removed, we wanted to talk with you before we put our plan together as to whether or not we can use the credit of the developed riverfront area in our calculations for what our future development is going to represent. So what we've done is we've sort of overlaid the new development onto the old developed areas, and we've got this sort of green area in here, the hatch area here represents previously developed riverfront area, except for this area, which is still used as parking and is still degraded. This area was all the pavement and degraded materials were removed, and then it was basically leveled and left, and it's now regrowing vegetation. So, this becomes critical to our development as to how we calculate our footprint of impact within riverfront area. The other thing that we're showing here is back when the Candlewood Inn was open, there was some big areas back here that I was out there many years ago and did the delineation on the site. And there are areas walking through here that were overgrown with herbaceous stock, but clearly were areas that either had been mowed or graded, probably graded and mowed, back when the motel was in its very active. So these areas were pretty much disturbed, and that's what this represents. They're not degraded because they weren't paved, but they were clearly disturbed areas, so it's not as much an impact as a degraded area, but it certainly was an impacted riverfront area. The other thing I wanted to point out is in this corner of the property, which actually has frontage off of Robbins Road, was a house with a driveway and a garage and a fairly large lawn area out back. It's on the property. It's on the other side of Smead Brook. This structure was also removed at the same time because the building was not in very good shape. And so Benderson took the building down at the same time the motel was taken down. So there's additional potential restoration areas, as you will over here. The other thing, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I just want to point out this line here is the current limit of, actually, no, it goes up through here. So this line here is the current line of the parking that's in use by McDonald's. And there is a driveway or an access into the back here off of Robbins Road. And as you can see from this schematic, this would be restored as part. So this is degraded now. And then this would be a degraded area that would be reused for parking for McDonald's and potentially parking for the supermarket and access to Robbins Road. So we would definitely be restoring this area as a matter of course that is currently degraded. Reusing this, and then basically we're looking for acknowledgement that this can be considered degraded. This is where the pool was, so that was degraded. This was where the building and the parking was that's been removed. But that's, as I said, has started to come back. But our restoration for the work within disturbed, what is now currently disturbed riverfront, but not degraded anymore, we can do a lot of restoration on the site to make up for that. So with that, I guess if I could maybe get a response from the commission as to what you think about our plan here.
Travis, do you want to just maybe kind of read what redevelopment means under the Wetlands Protection Act? It's 10.585.
Yeah, I
It's,
have it open.
yeah, and like define what redevelopment of riverfront area means under the act.
Yeah. Here, I can, yeah, I'll just read it out loud. Okay, so this is 1058.5, redevelopment within previously developed riverfront areas, restoration and mitigation. Notwithstanding the provisions of 310 CMR 1058 4C and D, the issuing authority may allow work to redevelop a previously developed riverfront area, provided the proposed work improves existing conditions. Redevelopment means replacement, rehabilitation, or expansion of existing structures, improvement of existing roads, or reuse of degraded or previously developed areas. A previously developed riverfront area contains areas degraded prior to August 7, 1996 by impervious surfaces from existing structures or pavement, absence of topsoil, junkyards, or abandoned dumping grounds. Work to redevelop previously developed riverfront areas shall conform to the following criteria. And then it has a whole list of criteria. Is that what you wanted me to read out loud?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking, I feel for the applicant, but this has already been decommissioned, so it doesn't meet that definition in my opinion. It's it's not it's not a redevelopment since it doesn't exist. It doesn't consist of impervious surface area. It's been decommissioned.
But so as the owner, there was no decommissioning on our end. So it was done by the order of the town. So if you're saying that, I mean, you guys would be able to go in to tell someone to remove something in the riverfront area, and then you no longer get credit. So we didn't come in and just get rid of it, and then 10 years later looking to then redevelop it. As a good faith owner with the city, we took down a structure that was causing issues before we had a good redevelopment plan in place, rather than leaving up an eyesore and something that was causing harm to the community.
Yeah, I understand that. And I just want to point out though at 10.585A, where it says at a minimum proposed work shall result in an improvement over existing conditions. That means an ecological improvement, not an economic improvement.
I fully understand that, and I think, while you can't see my mouse, I think what we're proposing with pulling back some of the areas that the motel was in, where the parking exists on the side by Robbins Road, and even that whole area in the middle that was previously mowed and maintained as part of the motel, we do have a significant portion of the southern part of the site that can be used for mitigation to then enhance that whole southern section of the site around the stream. So we would be proposing to do additional mitigation in that area to enhance that stream corridor.
Right, but you're proposing to put this application forward as a redevelopment, which has a different set of performance standards than just a riverfront development.
If I can chime in on that, I've had several projects fairly recently where we were doing work in riverfront area, and in dealing with those projects, the DEP has come out very strongly. If you follow 1058 Friends 5, which is the redevelopment regulations that the chairman just read off, the way the Western region of the DEP interprets this is that if you've got any degraded area on your site, which we do, this is currently degraded, then basically you can develop anything you want. You just have to mitigate for it, and you can even be closer than 100 feet to the river as well. And in this case, we are, and it's all either degraded or disturbed, with the exception of this little bit right here, which we've identified as previously undegraded. Frankly, I think it was in between two buildings. I think it was a strip that probably was left when the motel was originally constructed. But DEP was very clear about that, saying if you've got degraded area on site, then you can, all you need to do is, is mitigate and make it improve. And you're right, it has to be an ecological improvement, not an economic improvement. And that's where I think coming in and restoring the corridor, and it could be on both sides, would greatly improve the river corridor over existing conditions.
Yeah, and if I could add, so this, if I could share my screen.
Oh, sure, I can stop.
So in preparing for today's meeting, I found a notice of intent peer review for a different project. This is from March 4th, 2022 in Winchester, Mass. And it sounds like they had a similar kind of project. And this peer review looked at DEP's rulings about riverfront area. And I'll just read a couple lines out of this. In determining whether work on the site constitutes redevelopment within previously developed riverfront area, BSC has reviewed Mass DEP decisions and positions stated in project reviews with comparable site conditions. Obviously, this might not be exactly comparable to ours. In numerous decisions and reviews, Mass DEP holds that presently degraded riverfront area is the only portion of the resource area that should be evaluated under 310 CMR 1058.5, and that any portion of riverfront area that is not presently degraded must meet performance standards at 310 CMR 1058.4. According to 310 CMR 1058.5, degraded riverfront areas are, quote, areas degraded prior to August 7th, 1996 by impervious surfaces from existing structures, pavement, absence of topsoil, junkyards, or abandoned dumping grounds. That's what I read earlier. So this kind of fits with the current project, I think, comparable to the project proposed in this project. Mass DEP's review of a project proposed on a former drive-in movie theater in Methuen. I think that's how you pronounce that town name. I'm not originally from Massachusetts. Where a site visit demonstrated the riverfront area on the site that was once degraded with gravel and tar topping was currently well vegetated with grass, shrubs, and trees. The reviewer states that, quote, although the site was previously developed as a drive-in movie theater, we do not find that the riverfront area is currently degraded. The project was required to meet the performance standards at 310 CMR 1058.4, with the exception of a small area of riverfront area that was presently degraded with pavement. And then in a superseding order in Amesbury, DEP found the riverfront area within a former gravel pit, quote, at present contains pervious, well-vegetated land containing topsoil that provides riverfront area functions, and that these limited areas of degradation do not confer a degraded status on the entire riverfront area. The decision states, it is Mass DEP's opinion that the remainder of the site appears to have a darker soil layer at the surface that includes organic material and supports vegetation and is therefore not degraded within the meaning of 310 CMR 1058.5. The superseding order continues by stating, quote, Mass DEP does not agree with the conclusions that if any portion of a site contains degraded areas, then the entire site is allowed to be reviewed under the redevelopment standards. Mass DEP has repeatedly made clear that their interpretation of the redevelopment section of the Wetlands Protection Act regulations pertains only to portions of riverfront area that are presently degraded according to the definition located at 310 CMR 1058.5, but that work proposed in any portion of the riverfront area that is not presently degraded must meet the review criteria at 310 CMR 1058.4. So that's something I found today. That seems...
if I can add
Sure.
to that, all of those are examples that were in that letter from BSC are in the Northeast region.
Mhm.
I've had the Northeast region of the DEP render that similar argument from one of my projects. I've also had the Western region of DEP issue a totally different opinion on those kinds of projects. The Northeast region seems to think that you can apply paragraph 4 and paragraph 5 of the regulations on a site. The Western region was adamant that you can only do one or the other. It's either a redevelopment or it's a new development. Unfortunately, it's the way it is, and you're in the Western region. So I just know that actually on a project I had out in Adams, I did apply 4 and 5, and the response we got from DEP was, you can't do that. It's either 4 or 5. And that was from Mark Stinson was the writer of that opinion. So, and I know he's not there now, or I don't know if he's coming back, or I don't know what the deal is, but nonetheless, were we to file an application in that the Western region reviewed, they would, and we filed it applying both paragraph 4 and 5, they would come back with an argument that, you know, you can't do both. You got to do one or the other. But that, you know, be that as it may, the bottom line here is the buildings were taken down because they were creating apparently a problem in town. We had recommended, don't pull up the foundations, don't pull up the flooring of the buildings, don't pull up the pavement, because you're not ready to redevelop the site yet. And if you do that, it's all going to revert, and then you're not going to have credit for that. The town said, no, we want the pavement removed, we want the foundations, we want everything removed, which Benderson did at the town's request. That now puts us in a weaker position, as it were, on with that argument of the 4 versus 5 argument, whether it's redevelopment or not. I just make you aware that that's a situation that we're stuck with now, which is why we wanted to have this discussion with you prior to actually putting the notice together.
One thing that strikes me is that the example that Travis just read really relied on the site observations. So I'm wondering if you have photographs of the current condition, or if you've done any soil contamination tests or dug any soil pits, or have any way of showing the existing conditions with regard to the status of the vegetation and the soil and the rebuilding, because you know that it sounds like it's not really whether there's it's not just a matter of whether there's impervious surface there or not. It's, you know, how much has it restored itself since that work was done? What year was it taken down?
2015, I believe.
Yeah, 2015 or 2016, right around there. So it's been a little bit. I mean, we did have a project prior to that when the commercial industry kind of tanked in the late 2007, 2008. That went away when those buildings were still up. So that's kind of, yeah, as Gene said, that's kind of the position we're in, like trying to work with the town and get the eyesore down and whatnot. We're kind of now behind the 8 ball a little bit in that regards.
I will say though, Rachel, just as far as the riverfront area, redevelopment standards are outlined in the Wetlands Protection Act. It doesn't say, you know, degraded as defined as contaminated soils. It says degraded as defined as impervious surface from existing structures or pavement, absence of topsoil, junkyards, or abandoned dumping grounds. So,
Yeah, the
Barbara, that could be-
expectation is it's not contaminated. I mean, normally you would be looking at the soils to determine wetland boundaries, but it's definitely not a wetland. I can tell you that. It's pretty high and dry around the stream, believe it or not. But it definitely had large areas of pavement, and I was out there when the buildings were up in effect, and they definitely occupied a good portion of the site. And now, I honestly have not been out there recently. My understanding is though those areas where the pavement and buildings were removed have grown back now. Whether or not there's topsoil there, I don't know. Matt, did you actually bring in topsoil to put over the
I would
areas?
guess no. I would assume we just went
leveled it?
over and we removed everything. We backfilled it. We kind of leveled it and then left it in that position. I wouldn't think we would then come in and do
Right,
like 4 to 6 inches of topsoil or seeded on that.
right.
And
So-
I won't I'll share my screen real quick, and I won't say like I know the regulations very well and compared to everyone else. I guess what our thought process was also in coming to the board as well was kind of getting your overall opinions on the project, as well as what we're also kind of proposing in regards to kind of bringing things back and doing the mitigation in those areas over here, and just what your general thought process was as well on the project, and then how we could kind of, if the board likes the project, how we could kind of move forward to maybe accomplish that goal, and whether we do some additional soil test pits and see what's out there, if the topsoil is still not there, so we could take credit or whatnot. But was also kind of looking to get the board's general thoughts on the development of this parcel, as it's been vacant now for a while. The motel was not open for a while before that as well, and looking to try to get that developed again.
I can tell you, I just attended a workshop on redevelopment in RFA last week, and I asked a question. I think Fletcher, you were in attendance, and I asked a question. So what about, gravel roads and gravel pads? Because that's not technically impervious surface area, it's a pervious surface area. And the presenter, who they're not the end all and be all of issuing authorities or anything, but they said that their opinion was gravel access roads and gravel pads were considered disturbed and developed. So if you do have, broken asphalt out there and, very gravelly kind of broken up asphalt, that's something that would be worthwhile documenting.
Yeah, I agree that site photos would be really helpful here. I will say the aerial photos on Mass Mapper do give a rough sense of some still existing impervious surface and some at least kind of rough looking soils, but it certainly doesn't answer a lot of the questions we're talking about. But I definitely agree that the language is fairly straightforward and clear in the regs, and maybe this is something that DEP could help clarify if there were some existing decisions that maybe had more nuance or something different than what's in there, but yeah.
Fletcher, do you have those images open right now? And if so, could you share them, the aerial imagery?
I can try. Yeah, I have a new screen set up today, so let me see if it works. Can you all see the screen with the map on it, my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the parcel here, and here's the general area we're talking about. I assume Smead is right there, and you can see it, some concrete in the center. This is supposedly 2019. Let me just put this 2021 on real quick to see if it makes any difference, and it didn't.
I've been having issues getting the 2021 to work. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Got it open on mine with the 2021.
I think despite it saying 2021, I'm not totally sure but I think this is for sure after 2000, after the work happened, and probably within the last
Yep.
year or two. So, but like this right here is unclear to me if that's. It looks just like degraded, heavily packed soil. I'm sorry, not degraded in the regulatory sense, but looks like very heavily packed soil, and you know, I don't know what this sort of. That's a piece of foundation that's sort of overgrown, but you know, there's a few areas that could be questionable, kind of within the vein that Kristen was just talking about. And then I'll just sort of unrelated to the very current topic here, but you can see 2001 just to show what it was like then. So we're probably looking at, you know, the compacted ground from this. Maybe there is blacktop still. We're still looking at this concrete. And I guess this was the area that was previously undeveloped right here.
Right. That's the strip between the two buildings.
Yep. This was.
And the mowed lawn is very evident as well. You're saying, Gene.
Yep.
So yeah, actually, yeah, the 2021 doesn't reach this area. That's what it is, I guess, because like, if I turn that on, it overcomes that. So maybe 2019 looks like that's the year this is from, is 2019. So yeah, but it does look like, you know, photos of this area perhaps would be sort of, you know, could potentially change some of the areas, although I'd have to go back and look at the hatching here. But it looks like degraded was green, so you got it there. So that's, yeah, sort of unclear whether this is still degraded or not. This certainly is. Wait, I think that's the pad there. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell just from this. If anyone wants to see anything else on that.
Well, we can, as part of the filing, we can certainly delineate these areas. You know, to show what the footprint is, but you know, if we do come forth with a plan to develop this area, we are definitely going to be doing work within degraded area and disturbed area, and then providing mitigation for, you know, all the work in the riverfront area. We included a table showing the degraded areas as of pre-2015 and then, you know, more recent. And there's ample opportunity on the site for us to provide an enhancement to the riverfront area. The areas that were, you know, partially cleared or partially the building and the parking lots and so forth removed can be, you know, taken down and soil put down to make it like a real vegetated surface or give it a better chance than what's out there now.
Can you actually share those tables right now?
Yeah. And oops, I gotta figure out how to share my screen too. Okay. So can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, what did I do? I lost it.
Well, we could see it.
I'm sorry. I got two screens going and I'm trying to. So here we are. So this is the conditions as pre-2015. So there was a certain amount of undisturbed, disturbed, and then degraded, which would have been the buildings, the pavement, and so forth. And then our development plan has, you can see that there was undisturbed was 46,000. Our development plan is only 2,200 square feet within undisturbed, 1,800 square feet within disturbed versus what was there originally, and then 26,000 square feet in degraded versus the 40,000. So the difference between these, we've got 164,000 total riverfront area versus within our development footprint, only 47,000 square feet. So there's 120,000 square feet of riverfront on the site that we're not touching, regardless of its condition. So as we mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity for us to provide mitigation for any work within the riverfront area. So these numbers, I'll also note, these numbers of the pre-existing condition are based on that figure number 1, and these numbers are based on figure number 3 in terms of what was developed versus what will be developed for the development plan. So that's the plan that has all the colors in the hatch on it, is where these numbers came from. Now, when we file a notice, it's going to be also filed with the Western Regional Office. And I know from experience, when I filed in Adams and put down both 1058.4 and 1058.5, the response I got from DEP was, no, you can't do that. It's either 1058.4 or 1058.5. You can't do both. And as it happens, another consultant attended the hearing the night that I had the hearing on that project, and he confirmed, he said, yeah, you can't do that. You can only do one or the other. Now, I know that somewhat flies in the face of the letter you read from Northeast. And honestly, I've gotten the same comments from Northeast about a project where where I did take the approach. If it's a redevelopment, I'm only going to address 1058.5. And they said, no, you can't do that. It's got to be 4 for the parts that are undeveloped. I don't know what to tell you. But I do know you work in the Western region, and you're going to get comments from the Western region of the DEP. So.
As you said earlier, Gene, we have some new staff over in the Western region. And we're all a little unfamiliar with them. We haven't really worked with them for very long because they just had a pretty big turnover just since January. But my opinion personally is that this kind of sounds like a 1058.4 with the exception of that McDonald's parking area, but I don't work for DEP, so who knows what DEP will say.
Yeah, I have not had any projects recently in Western region, so I too don't know exactly what kind of a response we're going to get.
Would it be possible to share my screen for a second? I'm not sure if I can do that while somebody else is, or if I did get the 2021 imagery to load on Mass Mapper. I mean, if the DEP says one or the other, and there's currently, current parking and site development within the riverfront area, and that's what the DEP uses as their definition. That's one thing. I think that the counting the currently degraded area by site observation and what the current condition is, rather than simply using what was previously developed 8 years ago, makes sense. So that would be the alteration for the plans as the schematic sketch or whatever it is you presented it. It seems like there's part of that area, might currently still be lacking topsoil, but not all of it. And I think that should just be based on a survey of existing conditions rather than default using the former building footprints as the area calculation.
Well, we can, there's grass, what appears from these photos is grass growing pretty much everywhere. So we would have to make a determination as to whether or not there was topsoil under that grass, or whether it was degraded or not.
But also that it's pervious, I think, is the ticket. So, if it's an impervious surface, even a gravel road that's very compacted can be really that's, in my opinion, an arguable kind of situation. But if it's pervious, I think then it doesn't meet the redevelopment standards.
You mean impervious?
If it is pervious, then it would not meet the redevelopment standards.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In my opinion.
Well,
so if, my suggestion is just that the site visit and the survey of the existing conditions is what needs to establish that square footage, not previous building footprints that don't exist anymore.
well, like I said, we advised Benderson not to pull up the pavement and the foundations and the flooring in the buildings and anything that was impervious. And yet the town said, no, do it. We want you to remove all that stuff. So the town forced Benderson into doing something that I knew was going to put us into this position in the future, which I was trying to avoid. So, I mean, I don't know where that goes with the town, because it was their requirement to remove all those impervious surfaces. So,
I mean, I guess that's as the owner, that's kind of our big question is from the town. Is the town basically like, yeah, you were a good neighbor, tough is what it is? Then like, I understand that position. It's just, I mean, I don't feel like makes a good working relationship between a developer and a town if a developer goes and spends money and does certain things to work with the town to make something better, and then when we're able to put together a plan, we don't get any credit for it. If we had known that, we would never have touched the buildings. We would have let them sit there, and then we would be getting full credit for it 7, 8, 9 years later. That's just like the balancing act we kind of have with a project like this.
I definitely hear your predicament.
And it's not like we bought this, say, from the old owner and they had already demolished it. And like we purchased this site knowing, yes, the inn was down and this is what we purchased. And we're trying to get credit for something an old owner did. It's trying to at least work on what we specifically did in money we spent to try to clean up the site and work with the town, and not with the hope that the town would work with us and be like, okay, we'll still be supportive of how you're looking at this, knowing you did this at our request to kind of do a betterment in this area while we work through trying to get a development project.
Was anybody from the Conservation Commission involved in that discussion at the time? Because I've been on the commission since 2015, but I don't think that was never brought before our attention. Like, we're not the town, we're the Conservation Commission.
understood.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, is just that totally hear your predicament, but this is sort of just fresh to us. It's for us just to look at the regs and look at the situation on the ground and apply that. The history, questions of history and making exceptions would be more of a DEP question, I guess, or I'm not totally sure, but it's just not really within our, unless there was some pre-existing agreement maybe, or, but it's just, this is a new project to us. We see the current condition of the site and we see the regs, and I think that's really all we have any leeway to work with. But
And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong because you have more history with this project than me, but I do believe back in 2015, when you were removing the buildings because of the nuisance condition, you did file, excuse me, with the Conservation Commission because you were doing work within the riverfront.
Riverfront and buffer zone.
I would have to double check. I
I'm
believe you're
trying I'm
right,
trying to
because
see if
to
I can
do,
find the documentation because I believe we filed then, and the initial filing was to leave the foundations and the pavement in place. And I believe that something came up in the meetings and in discussions after the initial filing, and then or at least when there was an initial discussion, and then the final filing took it out and removed the foundations. And I'm going to try my best to find that documentation, but I feel like I found that in the files as I went through them.
yeah, I'm gonna try to go through. I'll go through and see what I can find as well. I would assume you would have had to for doing work in those areas. I'm kind of assuming. I'm like, again, I'm not
Mhm.
super familiar, but I would have thought, just looking at it, we probably would have had to file something to do work within those areas.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a quick question while they're looking that up. I know on the map it showed um, potential mitigation areas. Do you know what like the measurement of those total potential mitigation areas are?
Yes, I believe, I think on the figure, trying to find it. Oh, I guess we didn't put it on the figure. Amanda, do you have that number?
Yes, I believe we had, using those conditions, we had anticipated that there would be on the development site, approximately 10,000 and change of square feet of degraded area available for restoration. And then on the house parcel, it would have been another almost 3,800 square feet of degraded area available for restoration. And then for the disturbed areas, there was another 40,800 square feet on the development site parcel, and then another 16,500 approximately on the house parcel site of disturbed area that was available for mitigation.
And then we did file. It was in October of 2014. It looks like the order of conditions was recorded in, oh, what's the date? November of 2014. So we,
So if that was recorded in November, then you probably didn't do the demo in December. You probably waited till the next spring.
yeah, but I couldn't
2015.
find, I'll have to find the initial filing as well, and then kind of look through and see.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it as well. um,
So yeah, you had said you were on in 2015 with the commission?
Yeah, I joined in. No, it was probably like February, March of 2016.
Well,
16.
Matt, go back up to the signature page. Did, did you sign it?
Well, this is
it
filed.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
So this is actually, this is the, so it's the recorded copy.
Yeah, but there is this page with the signatures on it. of the members who signed the order. I don't know if that matters, but
It didn't, yeah.
It's great that it's recorded.
well, I'm on a commission myself, and I can tell you many times I've gotten orders back and I'm going, oh, I signed this? I don't remember it.
So I'll have to dig into this some more and see. This
Yeah,
is
it'll
one that
be
just,
like a couple of pages beyond all these conditions. Above these. Nope, above them.
oh, Bob, okay.
Yeah.
I found at least the draft of what was, I think, submitted. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that I don't believe that this was the final, but this was what I believe what we had intended to do, what they were talking about. Not that that matters, but I can share that.
Next page. Well, the next page with writing on it. Should be this. There you go. There's a signature page.
Sorry, I have multiple files open and it keeps
That
changing.
was signed in 2014.
Yeah,
That's
November
recorded.
2014 is when it was.
Okay, so you did not sign it then.
I mean, no. Nope.
So I'll stop sharing, Amanda, so you, but
But it would still be good. I don't know, Travis, if we would have a copy of that. We should have a copy of that if it's recorded.
Yeah.
And it's on the Mass Lands Registry of Deeds. It's public record if it's been recorded.
That's correct. So this is the plan that was in the order, in the notice of intent as to what was to be done.
Amanda, you're muted right now. I'm not sure if you're talking.
yeah, you're still muted, Amanda.
Sorry, that when I shared the whole screen where I could unmute myself went away. So I'm going to try and share it again. I apologize. There we go. So this was the file that I recalled being in there. So this was the filing, I think in 1020. This was the draft. I don't know if this was the one that went in with the actual filing. I can't seem to get my hands on whatever was officially submitted, but I know that this was what we were planning on doing, and it showed to remove the building but leave the foundations. And I believe that there was at some point when this was presented, there was pushback about leaving anything, leaving the foundations, leaving the pavement. So they were removed, as Matt and Jean alluded to, at the behest of the city. But this was the original plan. Which would eliminate the nuisance of the issues that were happening in the abandoned buildings, but then still leave the clearly pervious area in place. But impervious area in place, so.
Well, from what I am hearing, that the commission's opinion on this is that both sections 4 and 5 apply to this project. Is that a correct position? And that when I say 4 or 5, that's from the riverfront regulations.
I guess it sounds like maybe that's what we personally believe, but if DEP for our region says that it can be only one or the other, then it seems like the restoration would apply, since there is presently degraded area that would be
Right.
removed. So I think you, I think we are also a little unclear about what DEP is going to say now with the new staff there.
I think that it's just that the regulations under 10.584 are stricter than 10.585 because 10.585 is for redevelopment. So if you're going to have to adhere to performance standards for a project, I think that you would need to probably adhere to 10.584, which is a new development, as opposed to 10.585, which gives you credit for redevelopment. Even though this is a project where I completely sympathize with you, and unfortunately I wasn't involved with the commission back then, so I'm not familiar with the concessions that you and the applicant made. But it seems like this is a classic 10.584, riverfront area development kind of project, in my opinion.
Well, not the big issues here is for to apply for this project under 1058-4, we have to do an economic alternatives analysis and demonstrate that this is the only piece of land in Greenfield that a market like this can survive on. That's an extremely difficult analysis to do, and to to convince you of that this is the only place in town that this project will survive. In the past, in my dealings with the Western region in Riverfront, and where they've said, no, you don't have to do that because you've got degraded area on your project site, you go straight to 1058-5. You're not limited to working 10% within the riverfront area, or doing the economic analysis, or doing, all you have to do is mitigate for everything you do within the riverfront area. It's obviously an easier thing for us, especially in this case, which is why it's so critical for us for this to be reviewed under 1058-5 and not 1058-4. 1058-4, as I say, has an economic analysis that is extremely difficult to overcome. And then you are potentially limited to 10% of the riverfront area to develop. And clearly, you couldn't develop the site, probably even for a single family home, and stay out of 10% of the riverfront area. So whether or not we're reviewed under 4 or 5 is a critical issue for us. Obviously, we're not asking you to make a decision here tonight. You don't have a proposal in front of you yet, so you can't really take a position on that. But certainly, I agree with you. There's staff changes in the Western region. But I know if I were to file this under 1058-5 previously, they would have rejected, or 1058-4 and 5, they would have rejected that outright. They would have said, nope, you can only do one or the other.
In that scenario with the hybrid, it's sort of, you'd be asking them to consider it as almost like two sites, where there's one that has is undegraded and one degraded, and just consider the different performance standards in those two, or like what's the implication there?
Well, the project that I was doing that on was a roadway project, and we were doing some work in areas that I would call developed but not degraded, and so I justified having those altering those areas. It was an existing roadway that was being upgraded, and it's not like you can, an economic analysis for a roadway is a lot easier than an economic analysis for a shopping center. You can't move the road that's already there if you're improving it a bit. But they were very clear that I did not need to do 4 and shouldn't have done 4. I just needed to do 5.
I think that's a valid question, Fletcher, because if you did, say for your notice of intent in your performance standards section of the write-up of your NOI, and you had a 10.585 for your credit for the mitigation for the McDonald's parking lot area that you're proposing, I don't see how you could really split that up and call that wrong. I mean, if the whole project was filed under 1058-4 for riverfront area development, but then you were still proposing some redevelopment credit, I think that would still work, right?
If DEP accepts it, right?
For a subdivision, not a subdivision, but for a commercial development like this, I'm not quite sure how you would slice and dice that, because the building is not in the riverfront area. It's parking lot that we're talking about. And, I don't know how we could do an economic analysis on part of a parking lot and not the other part of it that's a redevelopment, which is redevelopment. I think that's partly the reason why Western Region says you can't have both, because you can only review it under one of these 2 sections of the regulations. You can't review it under both.
And I did want to mention, because it did come up earlier, we did have like a more recent walk, but unfortunately I don't really have very good photographs of that area. Most of the pictures we took were of just the stream itself. But I do know that when they were out there that, as you could see on the aerial, there is at least for sure some bituminous pavement left that was associated with the tennis courts. And then there has been some brush and things that has grown, but as Jean mentioned, we haven't looked to see if there's topsoil or anything. So,
Right. So we can do that and certainly map that out, but the problem is that would probably create a bigger, under existing conditions, a bigger area of degraded riverfront as opposed to disturbed riverfront. It doesn't alleviate the concern that you have about reviewing the project under both Section 4 and Section 5. And like I say, I'm not quite sure how I would do the analysis for 50 parking spaces that are not redevelopment, if that's what it is. I don't know what it'd be, but I mean, I guess my argument would be, I could build 50 parking spaces somewhere else in town, but they wouldn't do my development any good because they wouldn't be next to my development. Maybe that's my economic analysis.
I just add that there is a corner of the building, like probably a quarter of the building looks like it's in the riverfront area on the plan. So the building is at least partially in the riverfront area.
But again, the analysis is only for that corner. So if I say, okay, I'm going to cut that 2,000 square feet of the building out and build it across the street or some other part of town, it's not doing my project any good. It renders my project uneconomical.
I guess I don't have any experience with that alternatives analysis that you're discussing now, but it's as simple as like, where else could you do this, as opposed to like, how could you mitigate some of the impairment that this development will have in this area, like alternative materials or something? Not that it's going to make a huge difference in this case. I'm just personally curious.
Well, it's a lot more complicated than, is there another place in town I could do this? Because there's probably another place in town where a market could go, but would it survive? is it in a marketed location or a market location where it's going to be a successful development? And that requires an economic analysis and to determine, you know, not just one place, but maybe 10 places. Are they going to make it in terms of for this market? That's the kind of analysis you need to do.
Okay.
And that's not an easy, you know, thing to overcome.
So it's not just a case that you could integrate some very progressive, more sustainable design elements into this particular site as an alternative to the existing impairment that this existing project would do. It's not like that.
Well, the fact that any part of this development is in riverfront area, and if you don't, and that is potentially reviewable under Section 4, that means I have to do an economic analysis for the development.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yep, I hear what you're saying.
And that's basically the first hurdle that I have to overcome under paragraph 4 or Section 4, is I have to prove to you that this is the only place I can build this. And then we talk about all the other aspects of under Section 4. And where this site was clearly previously developed, the whole precept under 1058.5 is you can redevelop a site that's already been developed, but you do have to provide an ecological improvement. And we're going to be pulling back from the river the work that was developed, and we can restore that. And to be honest with you, even though it wouldn't meet the definition of previously developed or degraded, it was previously developed and mowed, and you know, it doesn't have the same ecological value that it could have, that we could improve to. So you know, basically we'd be looking at restoration. We wouldn't be restoring degraded riverfront. We'd be restoring developed riverfront by enhancing it. But it all counts. It you know, it would still be eligible as mitigation. And under Section 4, if I'm not mistaken, you can't even get to mitigation. In fact, actually, the riverfront regs, when they came out, they changed a lot about development and being on a conservation commission. They're kind of confusing. I mean, I believe there's some language in here which is what led the Northeast, the Western region to say you can't have both. There's language in the regulations that basically says if you have degraded area on your site, then it's evaluated under 1058.5. It doesn't say if the area you're developing is degraded. It just says if you have degraded area on your site. It would take me a while to find that. I mean, we could incorporate that into any filing just to, you know, highlight that for you for your interest.
On 1058.5.5A. says at a minimum, proposed work shall result in an improvement over existing conditions of the capacity of the riverfront area to protect the interests identified in MGL 13140. When a lot is previously developed, but no portion of the riverfront area is degraded, the
There you go.
requirements of 310 CMR 1058-4 shall be met.
Right. That's the section that I was thinking of where it doesn't say where you're developing isn't degraded. It just says if no portion of the riverfront area is degraded, then 1058-4 shall apply. And in this case, we definitely have a portion of our riverfront area that's degraded. Thank you for finding that.
I don't think that there's that strong of an argument that this does not apply, that 1058-5 doesn't fit this lot, but I think that the credit for redevelopment needs to be based on existing site and out like a site visit and existing conditions rather than just going off of previous footprints. So I think that if you reassess what the existing site conditions are and can evaluate, what area of the lot meets the current definition for degraded in as it exists now, and then the square footage still works out. Like I would just revise those tables to meet what is in the existing conditions rather than the assumption of what was there 8 years ago.
Well,
Was that just
That's
more,
how I see it.
is that like just more mitigation then, I guess, with my question, Gene?
well, I think it's better defining what is degraded on site today based on the existing field conditions. That's what you're suggesting, right? Not relying on what was degraded in 2015.
That's what I would. That's how I see it.
Right.
And
No, and
Matt, that
But still
that just
treated as a
essentially,
redevelopment. What was that, Amanda?
I was just going to say that essentially means that areas that are previously or are currently degraded are given, I guess, a different credit when you're fixing it, when you're improving it, versus like a undisturbed or disturbed area. So some of the areas that were degraded, if they are no longer considered degraded, they might just be considered disturbed.
So it's a higher level of mitigation?
Yes, essentially.
Which is fine from an essential standpoint, so the commission knows this is the development we like to do. We're not, say, trying to like take our level of mitigation from here down. We'll mitigate it and bring it up the whole area along the stream bed. We'll look at that. If we could do, as Gene was saying, under the redevelopment and just maybe have to increase more of the mitigation in the area that's available and spend more money doing that, that's something we're fine with doing and enhancing that more. I think it's just from Gene's standpoint, making sure it could be looked at as redevelopment, so we weren't looking at all those other economic analysis, Gene?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's under section 5, we're redeveloping the degraded area, and part of that includes mitigating for impacts to the riverfront area, and that's what we're definitely willing to do. And I think we can document that a lot of the site is still degraded, even under existing conditions, regardless of the buildings and the pavement having been removed. Not all of it is going to be degraded, though.
And I think if we're able to do that, kind of still keep our development, and maybe it just enhances the mitigation, that could be something we'd be able to look at and see. And if it just enhances the mitigation we have to do along the stream corridor in some of the riverfront areas, things of that nature, I think that'd be something we'd be willing to do and work with the commission on. If it's something you do the analysis and you come back and it's like, well, you got to lose 75 cars, you can't do this, or you're not able to do that, and it negatively impacts our development, I think we want to come back and talk again with the commission. Just if it worked if it worked with the buildings up and looking at it in, say, the pre-2015 conditions, and then it didn't work in today's conditions, but under redevelopment, we want to talk to the commission more. If it worked pre-2015 and it still works today, and it's just going to cost us more money in mitigation fees and things of that nature, I think that's something we'd be willing to kind of work out and kind of see. But I'm assuming that's not something you can look at the plan, Gene, and just be like, hey, yeah, you're fine.
I'm
Off the
just
top of your
curious,
head.
have you guys considered impervious parking area? They've got porous pavement now, or gravel parking areas, or alternatives to stormwater such as like LID and
That would address stormwater management issues. It wouldn't address development in riverfront area. I mean, even porous pavement in riverfront area is a development in riverfront area. That's typically done for stormwater management mitigation or measures, and obviously this project's going to have stormwater management with it. The plans we've shown you don't really reflect that, but there would be stormwater management features associated with this.
Wouldn't measures like that, where there's what might be considered impervious in this plan, if you made it pervious, wouldn't that contribute to the overall assessment of whether there's a ecological improvement? If
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I wouldn't consider putting in pervious pavement an ecological improvement.
Oh no, not to focus on that particular thing, but if you are able, if let's say DEP allows a redevelopment given the conditions of 1058.5, and you're doing some extensive restoration along the riverfront, and then so you're kind of working up to this ecological improvement. And then you also have these other construction-based, sustainability improvements. Maybe that would tip it, is all I'm saying. But I don't know if it quite works like that.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, I've done projects in riverfront where all we could do was put some shrubs along the edge of the stream and a couple of trees in, and can call that a redevelopment or an enhancement because there was nothing there. In this case, I think we'd be looking at a much more robust landscaping plan for the area of riverfront that isn't part of the development itself.
Agreed.
I think in response to Matt's comment earlier, I mean, it's not possible to go back and be like, oh, what would have worked under something that we don't agree and aren't going to consider because we don't think it doesn't comply with the current regulations.
I understand that with the commission there are there are then other items that we then have to consider in an overall business standpoint for something
Sure,
like.
but I'm just saying like that what we're looking at now, obviously the plan that disturbs the least amount of riverfront area possible is going to be the most favorable plan. So,
No.
You're asking about your own process of alternatives, and my response would be, it's probably worth doing a set of alternatives if there's any way of getting, additional building footprint or additional parking lot, reconfiguring it, opening up, green spaces in the parking, however it works to reduce, like as much as you possibly can reduce that square footage disturbance in the riverfront area, obviously, the better the proposal will look to us. So we can't go back and compare to something that didn't happen. And
I understand that with the commission. I'm just from a Benderson standpoint, though, there's other things that then come into play separately from the commission and the development there with that understanding. Yep. We've definitely shrunk this down. We feel as much, but okay. So we'll work with VHB on that and have them do that. Seems like there's kind of sort of a path forward, would you say, Gene?
Yeah,
Based on,
I think so. I mean, we can look at tweaking the design that we've shown you here. Obviously, the market has a certain amount of parking space that they need to make their facility function. We have access out on the Robbins Road that provides, it's not the primary access to the site, but it certainly is, I think, pretty important for truck access and so forth.
but it sounds like we can look at the site as a redevelopment, but it needs to be more analyzed under today's conditions versus 2014's conditions.
Yeah, and I would also just remind you guys that I think the DEP considers mitigation offsite if it's in the same watershed. So if there's any offsite parcels that might be potential for conservation restriction or restoration or mitigation, it's something to consider. If this particular parcel is really your bell ringer parcel and you want to move forward with this proposal, there may be alternative parcels in the watershed that could be identified as potential mitigation and restoration opportunities.
And
I was just gonna say
That's-
that basically for us, like the math has to work, you know, like certain amount of disturbed area, a certain amount of restoration.
if
That
that's
can
the
all
case,
That can all get pulled into your alternatives analysis as well, I think.
Well,
Sorry, Fletcher, go ahead.
work in degraded riverfront area doesn't require mitigation. Work in any other kind of riverfront area does.
Yes.
And restoration of degraded area, you know, enhancement of that counts as mitigation for work in those other resource areas, those other portions of riverfront other than degraded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's partly how the math works as far as, you know, our side, you know, the developer looks at it.
Sorry, I think Fletcher had a comment. I don't know if he's still. Okay, he's
no,
good.
it was relevant to a couple of topics ago. But
Okay.
no, I'm good.
And in regards to your comment about offsite mitigation, that you're right. There can be offsite mitigation. You only get credit at half for that. You got to provide 2 to 1 if you go offsite. So it's that much bigger area that you would need. And then the other thing too is, in reality, the mitigation only the portion of riverfront area that is potentially developable is credit towards mitigation. So if we go to an offsite parcel and we look at that and say, well, if we develop this and it's undeveloped, say for a CR, it's undeveloped, but only 10% of that is a potential development parcel, then we only can use 10% of that parcel and we only get credit for half of it. So it becomes a real losing proposition to go offsite with mitigation. Just so you realize that it's very expensive. I've done it. I had a client who had a huge piece of land. I said, well, we got to put a CR on this. It's like an 800,000 square foot piece of land to get a very little bit of credit for what they were doing.
But I guess our next steps will be conduct another site walk,
Right.
get the topsoil, look at the topsoil, look at what's out there, get some photographs, look at the numbers again.
Right, and we'll
Come back.
incorporate all that in the filing when we submit it. You know, to give you all the picture of it. I mean, this was actually very helpful for us because going into this, we were thinking, well, we have credit from 2015. We should be able to take that credit. But understanding your position, had we come forward with the NOI with that, we'd be in the same position, but with something in front of you and having to start over again, basically. So this is a lot better for us. We can go back out to the site and have the information that you want when you right up front.
Okay.
Thank you all for taking the time to meet with us
Yes.
this evening.
Sorry we took so much of your time. We do
Okay.
appreciate it, though.
Thank you very much, everyone. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you a lot. We'll go back into the drawing board, and then we'll have to put our notice together. So it'll be a little while, but you'll see us again.
Okay. Sounds good.
Good luck.
Thank you very much for your time.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we jump to business, can I say goodbye? I'm sorry, I'm really not feeling well.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
Thanks for sticking
Thanks for hanging
around.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good to see you guys. I'm so sorry to dip out. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right,
Hey,
you too.
Kristen.
Bye.
I'll be till then.
All right. So the rest of the agenda for tonight, basically all these things got added because Mitch said that we didn't have any public meetings or hearings. And I thought, well, this might be a good time to like talk about all these random projects that we keep, putting on the back burner, and our back burner is getting a little full. So I added all these other things to the agenda that I thought we could either talk about them or, postpone it to another meeting if we'd like to. So, um, but this is a new one to you guys. The next thing on the agenda is public records for all Board of Selectmen, Town Council, and City Council minutes that mention the Conservation Commission. I did a public records request just because I was trying to find minutes where the City Council had previously transferred property to the Conservation Commission. And unfortunately, I didn't find any of those. And I only have the records that go back to like the digital records, which is sometime in the 90s. I don't remember what the exact cutoff was, but they have given me what's the office that keeps those minutes. Anyway, they said I could come in and look at the actual physical copies going all the way back to the Board of Selectmen. So I might do that sometime. It's not like a huge important thing, but just something that's fun to do. But I did get some, I just added this to the meeting, right? I added it to the Google Drive right before this meeting. I added a link, Selectmen and Council minutes in the Google Drive. So there were a lot that were just like a lot of things that weren't really all that important, but I picked out the important ones and put them in a folder. Things that might help us like with managing, conservation land going forward. I'll just go ahead and share my screen and I can just kind of show you what I found. So the first one's really not that important, but it's just the town council voting to transfer funds to the Conservation Commission for the purchase of the Wedgewood Gardens property. All of these things I put in we have like an open space land folder system. So I added all these to the relevant open space properties. So we'll have them like going forward. The next one was Lillian Street Conservation Area, where they, let me see where that is. They spoke with the Conservation Commission about putting up no hunting signs posted in that area. This land is partially protected by the Conservation Commission. So anyway, I don't know if we actually have no hunting signs there, but if we do, it's because of that. And then this one I thought was interesting. My cat is making a lot of noise right now. Sorry about that. Oh, I can't. It's not letting me search. There it is. So this was changing the charter. Wait, is this Conservation Commission? Oh, this was a charter change about reducing the number of members of the Conservation Commission from 7 to 5 by removing the 2 alternate positions. Rationale is that the Conservation Commission Act does not allow for the appointment of alternate members. Under the Conservation Commission Act, only the 3 to 7 officially appointed commissioners may vote. There is no provision for alternate members who sit in and vote when regular members cannot be present. So I guess that's when that happened, and that's the rationale that they used. So that's interesting. And then the next 2, I'm just going through these real quick, but feel free to go back and look at them at any time. The next 2 were just when the city council appropriated funds from the Griswold Conservation Area reserve for maintenance work. And I think this is, yeah. Move that it be ordered. It was approved. So anyway, that just shows the process a little bit that we have to go through, I guess, to use the Griswold Conservation Reserve. And this 2007 one is the same thing for other work that was done. And then the last one, I thought this was interesting. The Bernardston motion that the town council authorize the town accountant to establish a reserve for appropriation account for the Conservation Commission for the Bernardston Road conservation land. It was tabled previously and removed from the table here. Land use / GIS planner LaRoche, explained that Conservation Commission wanted to harvest timber on the Bernardston Road conservation area. Once the timber was harvested, the funds obtained would be used for maintenance and improvements on the conservation land. This also says that LaRoche did not know how much money would be received. He stated that the planning department worked with 2 of the abutters to create a trail system connecting the Bernardston Road conservation land to the Westwood Wildlife Sanctuary. Yeah, so I didn't know about that trail system or if it even exists anymore. So anyway,
I think that's the one that there's no access to, isn't it?
there's like a 6-foot strip that goes back from the road to it, but if you look at it, it's just like that person's front yard, like the house right there.
Yeah.
So it's like technically there's access, but I don't think there's really access easily.
That's the one by the power lines, that general area, or?
It's the one north. It's the next one north of the Westwood conservation area.
Near the oak plant, maybe.
That is the Lillian Street conservation area near the oak plant. Although Google Maps calls it Westwood, but it's not Westwood. It's Lillian Street because it's right on Lillian Street right there, and the other one is on Westwood. So
got it.
Obvious which one's which. And those I actually emailed Mass GIS people to update it in the open space layer to change the names because they had Westwood on Lillian and Lillian on Westwood, and it didn't make any sense.
Nice.
So anyway, I don't know if anyone has any more comments on those, but we have all those now, and feel free to go through them.
Cool.
next on our agenda is options for Greenfield Wetlands Protection Ordinance NOI process. I just thought I would bring this up again because we had talked about, whether we wanted to have like a city NOI form. I also found, I haven't looked into this too much yet, but I found that Amherst, they allow the DEP Wetlands Protection Act form to be used for their ordinance. So like if there's like a city ordinance thing only, someone can submit the DEP form, but they only submit the fees to the city as listed on the form instead of the fees to the state and the city. So I guess that's another option in how that's managed. The only thing I'm not sure about is, oh, and then the other way they do it is like if it's a project that is, is under the Wetlands Protection Act and the ordinance, then they just submit the one form like people do to us, and then they use it for both.
Found out what a few towns do.
Oh, go for it.
Sure. In Acton, they used to have a separate NOI form, but they felt like that was cumbersome, so now they use just the state form. And they have a note at the end of the order conditions. In Ludlow, they just use the state forms and they don't have any changes about it. In Linfield, they just have slightly modified forms. In Ashland, they still require an NOI submission. However, the title referencing the WPA is crossed out and replaced with a reference to the correct Ashland town codes that contain the local wetlands. In Plainville, they use separate forms, but just mark local only at the top. And in Bedford, they use the same DEP forms, but write something like town bylaw only across the top in the DEP file number section. So it seems like they usually just have the same DEP or same state form, just with different versions of how to modify it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the administrative cost is the forms, but then do you have some examples of the order of conditions? So one of those, Mitchell, you said that there's just a note at the end of the order of conditions.
Right.
I know some towns order like administer like two completely separate orders of conditions for every project. That would be my concern about administrative, finding a way to streamline it so it's sustainable for us to manage in terms of the orders of conditions that are delivered as well as the forms. I guess the DEP clearly does have a problem with us like crossing off the DEP and writing like
That's what
our
sounds
own
like.
ordinance at the top and then re-uploading the PDF to our website.
Yeah, and I saw on Amherst, they just wrote Amherst Wetlands Ordinance under where it says Wetland Protection Act, so it said both at the top. But I felt like when Mark Stinson was at our meeting and we were like asking him all these questions, I thought he was saying you could either have a separate one or just clearly say like from here down these are local ordinance only. That way
I think that would be my preference in terms of us having to keep on tabs of like compliance and just paperwork. It's also my preference as an applicant when in my work is to have it all in one orders of condition, and if there's separate orders that apply to just the local, then just to paragraph those out in orders in the same orders of condition. So there's one order of condition. I think it's a lot more likely that we'll get compliance that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And like Mitch was saying, other people have gone from having like two forms down to one form just to make it easier. And I think like the easier it can be for us and for applicants, it's probably better. So I think the other part of that is communicating that we are now using this new process. I mean, obviously we can upload it, like upload instructions. I know we have instructions for filling out NOIs on our website or our web page, and that could be updated, to include the local ordinance stuff. But I mean, that's probably the bare minimum of what we what we have to do. But it probably would be good to, I don't know, get the word out a little more. That
We could kind of we could put it at the very end, maybe, so that they wouldn't have to reconfigure their NOI if they left it out. Maybe, I don't know if that's possible because I can't picture the integration. But does that? Or am I talking about something completely different? Like, because Travis, your concern is they would just come to us with an NOI, but it wouldn't have, if we had incorporated our piece into it, it wouldn't have that.
well, I
Well,
think the biggest concern would, I think the
I think
biggest
I misunderstood
concern,
Rachel then.
I think the biggest concern is that in our ordinance, we extend riverfront area to intermittent streams, and we have a different definition for, I forget what it is, for vernal pools. I think we have like a broader definition for vernal pools too. So there could be projects that
I see.
people
They'd
would
have to be
need to
considered under
submit.
that scope. Yeah.
They would only be under our local ordinance, that they wouldn't otherwise be filing for.
Got it.
So I don't know if,
I think if there's consensus around adapting the DEP forms and adding instructions to our website that clearly says that these are the differences. If your project only if your project is only regulated under the wetlands protection or the Greenfield wetlands ordinance and not under the WPA, use this form, then I feel like if that's easy to agree on, we should do that.
yeah,
And I feel like the reverse of that is having to figure out a system for enforcement where there's we would have to then be we should have been, I guess, the whole time, like issuing enforcement orders for any development projects that would happen outside of the that were not in accordance with the Greenfield ordinance, but were fine according to the Wetlands Protection Act, which I don't think is that different from trying to keep tabs on projects that are in violation of the Wetlands Protection Act. Like, what's the system for that?
Yeah, and we could always, find out someone did something and then have them do a restoration project or whatever to make up for it or whatever.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then I guess, we could say that, in those instructions, it would say like that we would also accept the state form when the project is for both Wetlands
Yes.
Protection Act and Greenfield ordinance.
So I would be in favor of that process and adding it to our website for now, so that the instructions are clear. At least that way, anybody that's at all considering having to apply and goes to look and see like what is on our website will be like, oh, and now I have to go back and check. Like if it clearly states what the differences are, there's some way for the instructions to indicate that this is the difference, and this is when you use one form, and this is when you use the other form. I feel like that then at least anybody who's applying will be more informed than they are now about the Greenfield ordinance.
Since this is like kind of a process change, should we like motion on it, and that way there's like a record of voting to change our process to do this? I don't know if it's necessary. I don't know.
We can motion for something that's in other business. It's fine.
I mean, it'll be in our minutes and hence in the record, right? But
Yeah, I don't know.
either way.
Okay, I can motion to modify a DEP form and upload that with instructions on how to apply for a city-only NOI in the case that projects only fall under the jurisdiction of the Greenfield Wetlands Ordinance.
Second that.
Okay.
Okay, seconded by Fletcher. Any further discussion on that? All right, don't hear any further discussion. Anyone opposed to that? Anyone abstaining? Okay, that passes unanimously. Noting that Kristen left earlier, so now it is only me, Fletcher, Erica, and Rachel.
That means you got reinstated, Fletcher?
I did, yeah. And I might as well bring this up now. I double checked to make sure there wasn't some exceptional circumstance with my reappointment, and there wasn't. It's just the way it is, and I just wasn't getting the communications from the town hall to start, and when they finally did, there was that lag period. So I guess hopefully, I mean, that wouldn't happen with everybody else if they're getting the email to their correct address from them, and then but otherwise just be aware that few months, couple months before your term's up, you want to initiate that.
Good to know.
I did notice that they are now added to our agenda, so thank you, Mitch.
Mhm.
Nice remind myself
Yeah.
a year and a half before I have to worry about it.
On that though, assuming they are 3 years, Mitch, I think mine would be 2025, or am I wrong about that? It says 2024 when I looked.
No, you're probably right.
Okay,
That was simple math error, looks like.
no worries. Yeah, I wasn't totally sure myself. So
Okay, well, let's see if we get to any other items on our agenda tonight. Let's see. Next, we have administrative approval for limited tree removal. This was something we had talked about before, and I didn't know if I just bring it up again now that we have an agent again, and just wondering what people were thinking on that.
Was there
Personally,
any precedence? Was that also on the list of stuff? Mitch, I don't remember it, that you passed out saying that you had looked into that, what other towns do for that?
Yeah, I found out what some other towns are doing with that as well. In Acton, it looks like they informally approve tree removal if there's possible damage to the house. They don't have any like forms or anything with that. Lolo doesn't. They have the usual RDA process for any tree cutting. Linfield has an internal policy for tree cutting. They do a site visit and they do possible tree planting replacement. They require a meeting with a tree company and they supervise and ask for mitigation. They just keep a list and try to stay consistent. In Sharon, they allow for cutting of dead trees. In Dennis, they have an administrative approval form for cutting down trees. In Ashland, they have hazard trees can be issued an emergency certification by the agent, which is ratified by the commission at the next meeting. In Plainfield, they authorize the agent to allow minor cutting of dead/damaged trees as they see fit without having to require a filing in each case. If they're unsure of the tree status, they ask for a letter from a botanist or a tree company for the file. And in Bedford, the homeowner can have that tree removed without coming before the commission, provided that a Massachusetts certified arborist examines the tree and certifies its immediate danger. They only need to notify the commission in writing of the intent to remove the tree and provide a photograph of the tree and a letter from the arborist testifying to the hazard. Seems like usually it's informal, and if it's proposes some kind of danger.
And none of those have limits, so none of it is like, oh, if it's X, like if it's 5 trees or less, like that's there. It's really just based on site conditions and evaluations.
I
It's
think
not on the like scope of work.
I think a couple of them might have mentioned just if it's like 1 or 2 trees.
It sounds like we need to set that portion of the criteria ourselves, like, X number of trees, state of the tree, DBH or whatever it may be. And then personally, I liked assuming we do that, I kind of liked the Bedford one, I think, with the agent, given that criteria in an emergency situation, or even in just a very specific situation, could allow it and then just sort of bring that info to the Conservation Commission to ratify, but I don't know. Not exactly sure why I like that one.
Isn't that what Maureen used to do? I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember her having
I don't know.
administrative authority to approve it without us. I think, yeah, I don't remember that for tree cutting. I mean, we've done plenty of RDAs where it's like, oh, this is an RDA. That's because you're not disturbing any soil and all you're doing is. But we've also had people come to us with like just absurd arguments to remove, 18 trees that are 75 feet away from the house because I don't know, they've got probably some arborist or forest or friend that they're, trying to keep happy or whatever that have, so Travis, what do you like? I feel like if we're coming up with criteria, it's not like a change the bylaw. I don't know. Should it be should it be listed as a public hearing to discuss this and then like listed at a meeting so that like it goes in the announcement and like if there anybody in Greenfield like happens to see it and has really strong feelings can like come and then we like motion to approve a certain criteria by which you can just go to the agent or the agent like if we're delegating authority to the agent sort of that is something that would outlast us, right? Us 5 that are currently on the commission. Like, what do you think what's the like appropriate process for establishing that kind of authority?
So I can't remember where I have information in my brain and I can't remember where it came from. It might have been a MACC thing. I don't know, but I remember learning that like an agent having administrative approval is like there's nothing in the Wetlands Protection Act that even allows that, but that DEP's like, well, it helps out the commissions and like they like let it slide basically. So it's like it's like not even like legally a part of the Wetlands Protection Act. So uh um and I guess I was under the impression that it was just like it's just kind of like a policy that we have, that we would just list it on our website and then that's what the policy is and to let people know. But because I don't think it necessarily has to be like a bylaw or anything. I don't know if Mitch, if you saw any of those towns where it was like actually in the bylaws or if it was just like a policy.
The ones that I asked said that no, it wasn't like anything official in the bylaw.
Yeah, and I mean, this is also something that maybe we don't want to do that, and we could just have people do RDAs like they do now, um, and we don't have to decide tonight. I just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, I would vote for not going through the whole thing tonight, just because we do have some back and forth to consider. But I almost feel like given the potential for a very edge case emergency situation, we should have something. Um, like really precarious tree, unless that's already covered under something else. But
Is it already covered under like emergency permit? I know the thing about emergency permits, I feel like, is that the damage has to happen, if I'm remembering correctly. Because I remember Mark Stinson coming to a meeting and helping us be like, okay, if there's an emergency permit, then what you're doing is you're giving immediate uh, permission to restore and fix to like situation the way that it was before, and you're not allowed to actually do any additional disturbance or improvements, right? So you can't like revegetate and bring in topsoil and restore a bank that has been eroded. You can mitigate to prevent any further erosion. Like you can't, there's like a limitation. So I don't know how that would factor like an emergency permit for a tree that hasn't fallen yet.
I don't know. I'm looking at the emergency section in the Wetlands Protection Act right now. I haven't found anything.
I did find these two, well, I just searched MACC administrative approval, and I guess off of the MACC website, there are these two examples of forms for Weston and Newton that list these reasons for administrative approval. So yeah, 1 to 2 hazard trees, and I don't know. I haven't read these yet, but it might be interesting. Maybe I could just put these in a folder, Travis, and when we do discuss them, I agree that it should be put on a meeting where we also have no or few public hearings, but I think it should be put as like a I don't know. I don't know why I feel like if we're doing this as like we're setting a policy that it's like ethical to make it a public hearing, but I have no idea if that's just
I don't think there's anything that would prevent us from making it a public hearing
or public
or
meeting, I
public
guess.
meeting.
A public meeting, not a public hearing.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, a
just
public
specifically, I don't know. I don't know. But I can is there a good place where do you want to ping or chat a link to the drive where I can upload these so that we can look at them in more detail when we have our following conversation?
there's under administrative documents, there's a folder called templates. That might be a good place. Unless those are like currently used templates, maybe we should make a new folder.
I don't know if we're reading through 10.06, Travis, but it doesn't help in this scenario, I don't think, because it's talking about emergency certification and 24 hours and all that. And yeah.
Okay, I created a folder in the templates folder that says precedent templates from other towns because it does look like all those templates are Greenfield current use templates. And I guess Mitch and Travis, you can move them around if a different place makes more sense.
So maybe that's something we can look at the templates, and everybody can be thinking about that for a future meeting. I mean, I don't think this is like, we're not. I feel like with the NOI, the local ordinance NOI, like that one is like more pressing because it's whether we're enforcing our ordinance or not. Whereas this is just like how we're dealing with it. Like either way, we're going to deal with them. So
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I mean, I feel like a lot of Eastern Mass towns do it just because it takes a load off of volunteer time. Like it's so frequent, and it's often such a small scope, and it's such a big burden on homeowners to come before the commission for a whole evening. And I feel like a lot of the benefit of it, besides some obvious small sort of ecological benefits of like, convincing homeowners to snag trees instead of remove them all to the ground and things, is really about education, right? Like that's the benefit of it. And if that's something that the agent can take on and do, go out to somebody's house and say, okay, I have authority. Like if you leave these as snags, if you leave wildlife, whatever, if we can accomplish the same outreach and educational benefits without taking the time at a public meeting with all of our time, and potentially having a homeowner sit through an hour and a half or a 3 hour meeting, which I think our meetings have gotten progressively, or like the average length of our meeting is greatly like increased remotely over what it was when they were in person. And I think that's why a lot of the Eastern Mass state towns do it, is because their development pressure there is so high that they're valuing their time and being like, well, if we could not add this hours and hours and hours to our meetings and have an agent do this and accomplish the same environmental benefits and the same kind of education and outreach that we all, 6 or 7 of us would have to do in person together, then it's a more efficient system with the same outcome. So I think based on the fact that, I think based on that, it would be good to discuss and consider setting that system up. I just think there's other discussions that are like this kind of like, is it a redevelopment or not, or like large development in along Route 2, like that's much more worth our time all coming together than the poor person that is frightened to sleep at night because there's a limb that's hanging over their bedroom. That's my take on it.
all right. So I don't think we're going to decide anything tonight. Does anyone else have anything else on that item before we move on? Okay. So the next thing on our agenda was develop criteria for properties the Conservation Commission is interested in acquiring. This was one that I think we brought up around the Stone Ridge Lane process. And the mayor said something about, like other city properties that could be transferred to the Conservation Commission. It would probably have a lot of wetlands. And I know I think other towns have, some even have like parcel by parcel, like these are the properties we would be interested in acquiring one way or another. So it could be something like that, or there could be like like a rubric or something where we say like, oh, if it has wetlands, we give it, this many points, or if it's next to existing conservation land. And I think this would, kind of goes back to that property that the city had the right of first refusal on that we talked about like a couple months ago, where like it was next to existing conservation land, and it did have wetlands and habitat and all these things. So I mean, this isn't even something we have to do, but it could be like part of like a long-term planning sort of process to decide like the criteria. And we could do this like in GIS and just say like, if it's adjacent to a stream, if it's, has wetlands on it, if it is next to existing conservation land, and then sort of like see which parcels those are. I don't know. It could just be like you know, something that, I mean, we could even like put it on our webpage, and like maybe someone would see it and say, "Oh, I own one of those parcels. Maybe I'll donate it to the Conservation Commission." You never know, you know. But if people don't know that you might want it, then that might not be a possibility. So I don't know. I just thought I'd bring it up because we had talked about it before, and just thought I'd follow up.
Sounds like
I think also good.
Go ahead, Erica.
All right, I was just gonna say, I think also part of it's just communication with the town, because it seems like there's lists and some properties we're told about and then other properties we're not, and that was kind of what happened with Stone Ridge. We got caught off guard. We didn't know that it was up for auction, and so maybe just better. I don't know who they notify. It seems like they notify town council if they're going to sell. I don't know if they want to sell property, but they don't notify all the other boards. So maybe we can somehow just better communication with what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Yeah,
I think what they explained is that, sorry, Travis, you were probably going to say the same thing.
You can go ahead.
It depends on whether it's actually excess property that's owned by the town or whether it's private property that is only up for auction because of back taxes. It's not actually owned, like it's not considered excess property then private property. It's just the state has the right to sell it and recoup because of unpaid taxes. So it falls into a different bucket, and that's when we don't hear about things. And I don't know. I like the idea of adding something to the website and saying like, we accept donations of land, especially land that meets this following criteria. And I think there's other towns that have that on the Conservation Commission page. So if we don't have that on our website, I think that's a great idea. But I think what the mayor was referring to is a little more complicated, because it would be like a kind of a good faith request to the treasurer to evaluate the environmental potential for all private properties that had their back taxes, like outstanding back taxes, before the town put them up for auction to recuperate taxes. And I don't know if there's any way we could like, I don't know. I don't know how the process, like, I don't know the best way to administratively like try and insert that into the town's process of
You could
tax
change the
lien
bylaws or
properties.
something, but at least if we did, especially once the mayor's expressed interest, if we did have a well-researched, well-developed list or map of them, it's at least one of those, we know that they know, or they know that we know situations, and there's something also to point to if it is. Yeah, I mean, I think it's worthwhile either way, but yeah, if I wonder if any other towns have modified bylaws, and if that overrides like the state statutes in some way, so that the Conservation Commission does get notice of other categories of property to be disposed of.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I was thinking was, if we had these criteria, it could be something that the treasurer has and knows like what our criteria would be, or
Yeah.
If we even mapped it out, and you could apply it to the parcels as they currently exist, and then have a list of parcels, and then if it's on that list, that's one that we're interested in.
Yep.
I think that's an appropriate That would be an appropriate map to hand the treasurer.
Did you say
I,
inappropriate or
no,
appropriate?
an appropriate map to provide the treasurer with.
Mhm.
I I think if I were a homeowner of an undeveloped parcel and a map with my like parcel information was uploaded to the website as a public like statement that like we want your land, like I think that might not go over very well with the general public for that to be like, but I feel like if we if if the mayor's indicated that they would consider the transfer of properties in the future the way that they did for Stone Ridge Lane than a list of parcels in town that meet the criteria of that the same criteria that Stone Ridge met, you know, um, would be appropriate to hand the treasurer
Yeah,
or the mayor
of
and
course.
ask.
Yeah.
I will say though that, plenty of land trusts and I guess conservation organizations have strategic conservation maps that do call out specific parcels. But yeah, we wouldn't want to say like we want them. More so that like these are highly valued for conservation, and here's a map. And it can, I mean, it certainly has happened where like a conservation conscious owner is like, oh, I saw this on the map and what can we do?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and it's not always necessarily that it's gets, donated to the Conservation
right, yeah,
Commission.
maybe
Like
a
could
grant
be
that gets them
conservation
money and yeah,
restriction or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
yep.
So I don't know. Again, I don't think we're gonna come up with this list here tonight, but
No. And I just want to point out that it's continuously growing the strategic conservation tools / analysis from different organizations that we could throw on top of any of our own criteria to evaluate these. So like I think Mass Audubon just has a new one. So.
and that could be something that unfortunately, the open space and recreation plan is brand new, but when a new one comes out, that could be something, that gets added. Like that seems like the appropriate place for it to be is in the open
Definitely.
space and recreation plan, which I think a lot of towns, the Conservation Commission is in charge of producing that, but we're not as much. But
Mhm.
so that might be something for the back burner for was it 3 years, I think, is when the next plan comes out.
Mhm.
I'll fly by.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, I do have a couple other things that I mentioned. So if no one else has anything on that,
I have something semi-related, maybe,
go
that
for
I
it.
can make really quick. I'm trying to just learn QGIS really quickly, and so I made a map of it's just like a Greenfield hydrology map, basically. And I don't think it's going to be particularly useful to us, like in evaluating projects necessarily, but it might just be kind of cool as a quick reference. Like, oh, there's a brook. So before I finish it, I wanted to share it and see if you all wanted any other particular data points on it. And I can do that really quickly, assuming I downloaded it here.
I've been teaching myself QGIS as well.
Have you? Nice. So far,
Seems
so
like a
good.
Yeah.
That's what our firm uses for everything.
Oh, cool.
It's really awesome. It has so many plugins, and actually, my colleague Bosch has written code. So we have all like personalized style. Like it's really powerful. I really like it.
Yeah, so far, the only thing that
We're
is
seeing
less,
oh, yeah.
I don't know, the labeling I'm still playing. I've only tried once, but all right, so I have no legend yet, but basically it's elevation with like a tweaked gradient so that it shows you like, Greenfield's pretty flat basin basically, but it shows you where there's like some distinguished height and then where it's particularly low, around the floodplain areas. And then it just has DEP wetlands with no particular categories, just shown in this green. Has an aquifer, which it's this big thing here. So it's got aquifers, wetlands, biomap, I mean, not biomap, priority habitats. So for potential like MESA permitting things is in the yellow. And then major roads, minor roads are sort of just faded in there. And then it has water, drinking water sources in the blue, and it has water quality stations in these other dots here. And that's really it. But more so, my thought with doing it in the first place was kind of like, I don't know, just kind of seeing like the topography at a glance and the major like the stream names, just to kind of give like a visual or a mental representation when we're talking about stuff. But yeah, so should be done soon, and definitely open to adding other, categories or data points to it. But I do want to keep it pretty, like, what's the word? Like I'm not looking to put a ton of labels on it or make it super busy, but
I will say at least on my screen, the wetlands are a little hard to see because some of them are like the same green color.
definitely, yeah, I agree with that. I was even not going to put them on there, and I was like, well, that wouldn't be. I probably should put them on there. So yeah, I agree. I should figure out a better symbology for that. On my screen, it's clearer, but different screen. Yeah, looking over WebEx, I'm sure it's not. And there's also some labels that aren't showing up. This is where I was struggling with QGIS. Is like I told it not to hide them, but it's still hiding them. And then I don't know if we have maybe like some informal names for things that that aren't in the state's, hydro layer. So maybe that could be a little research, but yeah, that's where it's at. So I was just
I'm curious
open
what
to any. Yep. Okay.
the orange points. I think they're orange, like
Yeah.
the streams.
Those are water quality monitoring stations. I think it said it was just a mass mapper layer that I didn't really look too deeply into, but I assume it's where maybe USGS or
I think it's a DEP sampling set.
Oh, DEP rather, yeah.
I think.
Yeah, because I know they have one on. I thought they had one on a Fall Brook. Oh, right here. I think. No, that's the Connecticut. Sorry, I thought Fall Brook was like supposedly. Some property owner told me it was so like pristine. I think they said USGS uses it as a gauge of like cleanliness or something, but I guess that's a different data point. But yeah, feel free to shoot me an email with thoughts, and I can always change it later. But
sure.
Cool.
I really like the hillshade with the gradient on it. It's really intuitive reading topography like that. That's great.
Nice. Yeah, that was a good learning experience to change that.
Yeah, I agree that the wetlands can be a little more visible. Also, I don't know if this exists, but where are dams available? Because
Yeah,
that's
they
something
are
that
available.
I've often found, like people just talk about like the this dam or the that dam, and the DPW will come with us and I'm like okay.
Dams and
And I have to like, so I feel like for a hydrology map, like
dams
dams,
and conditions, yeah. It says
yeah,
like
would be
what state of repair
really
they're in, so
helpful.
that'd be good.
And then yeah, I think like yeah, it's good. There's always that line, like some of FERCog's maps that have the floodplain, like FEMA floodplain plus the river corridor plus the NHESP plus it gets extremely hard to read. So I think
I could
just
have
having
the floodplain. I just don't have a data source currently for that.
yeah, because it's not digitized. Maybe FERCog might have it digitized.
Cool.
In fact, I know they have it digitized. FERCog has it digitized as well as their river corridor work.
Nice. Might reach out to them for that.
All
Thank
right.
you for the feedback.
Yeah, no problem. So I just had a couple more things under other business, are probably the longest other business we've ever had on our agenda. The next thing I put on there was conservation land management. Conservation land management planning. I guess that works as a statement. Basically, I was just wondering if, like, I don't know. I was just thinking about like our conservation fund and like, um, whether we should do more with. I I kind of feel like people, like if we start, putting out these maps of like where trails are and stuff, like some of our properties, like they're not marked at all. Like even just having like a sign or like, have like a metal sign that's like up high enough that no one's gonna reach it or something. Or um, I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of opportunities. Obviously, all of these things take time and money, but or volunteer work. Uh, but I don't know. I'm just thinking like signage, and I don't think we're going to get to the point of doing like all the boundary mapping and boundary markers and all that anytime soon. But um, I guess I was just wondering if there was like an appetite for any of that kind of work. Not, we're doing some trail maintenance at Griswold, and I don't know. I guess I just feel like there's a lot of opportunities.
I mean, I've installed and built the type of signage you're talking about. I design it and know some printers who print it on and what materials to print it on. But yeah, I think definitely sounds like a volunteer, focused activity. And I don't know that we really have any volunteer pool sort of that we know of. I'm sure there's plenty that would love to volunteer. So that might be the first sort of, order of business is get some volunteer stuff going.
Yeah, and
That could be something on the website.
Sorry,
That could be something on our website, asking people to, if they have some kind of skill or whatever that they'd like to volunteer.
Oh, a form, yeah. Mm-hmm. That'd be good.
I think part of why this popped up for me is there's a Friends of Highland group Facebook group and Friends of Highland Park Facebook group, and they were talking about like organizing all these volunteers to like fix up the trail sign at the beginning, and I was like, oh, we have a lot of conservation land that don't even have sign. Like if someone went to find it, like I've gone out there to find some, and I'm like, some of them are. You're like, okay, I guess it's those woods right there because that seems right. But there isn't any like signage or anything. And I know there's like we've talked about the potential for signs to be vandalized and things like that, but I don't know.
I feel like our our like go out and walk Griswold together, like aspect was like super helpful. So I definitely have like desire to make that happen. I'm a lot happier to go out like on a Saturday morning and brainstorm that stuff and like actually go to these sites because there's still sites. Like I've never been to that Westwood wildlife sanctuary. I've never been to the Lillian Street one. Like I just they're tiny little pockets, and I live walking distance from Highland Park, so I just go there all the time. So I feel like if we had like a kind of went down the order like we did Griswold, I feel like the conversation that we had afterwards was really specific and really helpful, and it was really great to be there on site with everybody and brainstorm together and create a really great list that can be checked off of what needs to happen. And then we'll figure out who's going to do it. And now we're meeting with Lincoln, and then we're going to figure out the funding and get that done. And I wonder if there was just kind of a rotation, like each year we like tackle another piece of our list. So like if 2022 is like let's get Griswold up to snuff, and then like next year we can do
I like the idea of putting properties on our lists to, rotate next one to focus on. But I think it's worth considering like a specific project focus for all the concept. Like in other words, if it was signage, it might be worth thinking about like a signage drive for all the.
That's fair. Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
But there's no reason we can't do both,
Because of cost analysis, you mean? It's like if we got like new signs for all our conservation properties, we could do it all at once.
For sure,
that volunteer efforts
and consistency of design and existing volunteers.
That's
and
fair.
Jim's building the structures, and Jim moved, so now it's that kind of stuff. So
totally, yeah, no, I get that. That's a good point.
And I will say I was surprised. I did hike the Lillian Street Conservation Area last year, and there is a sign there. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know we had a sign there. So, and that one's actually, we don't actually own the property up to the road. There's an easement through the property before it gets to the part where we own, but there's a sign at the road. So I thought that was interesting. But once you're in it, you have no idea when you leave it, like that's part of the problem, I guess. But yeah, so maybe we'll have to figure out how we're going to go about this. But like you said, probably maybe after we do a little more with Griswold, we can pick this back up for some other, since that site visit is in 2 weeks, or no, a week and a half. So cool. We can bring that up again later. Well, at 9 o'clock, I know we're not gonna go into depth on the next one, which is Greenfield's Wetlands Ordinance Review. I know we had started that a long time ago, but I don't know. Maybe we just wait for another meeting to talk about this in detail.
Yeah, never mind. I'm going to hold what I was going to say then.
Oh, go ahead.
I agree. No, I mean, I'll wait. It was just about the collaboration. Like if we just had a doc going where we're all getting in individually and do it, but it sounds like we at least want to talk as a group first before we initiate that anyway. So.
Yeah, and so that actually, in the Community Preservation Committee, we're working on the community preservation plan, and we've talked about how it's a violation of open meeting law to have like a Google Doc that we're all editing, because it can be considered serial communication, and like you could write one thing and then I write something, responding to what you wrote, and someone else writes, and it's like a deliberation because we're all writing it and seeing it together, and the public isn't having any input on that. So we might not be able to do it that way. And what I found in old Conservation Commission minutes, which I don't have on hand right now, but what they did was each person took a section and then like made edits, and then they came back to the, put on, shared it with everyone else, everyone read it, and then at the meeting you either just accept it or like, oh, change this to this to this. So that could be one way we do it, is just, and some sections, we might not even need to change. Like we could talk about oh, we want to change sections 3, 4, and 5. Who wants to take 3? Who wants to take 4? Who wants to take 5?
Did the state specifically say you said that's serial communication not allowed, or because to me it's like we're going to come up with a final product either way, and it's going to be in relation to the existing product. So it's like, what does it matter how we got there if as long as we present the final product before adopting,
Yeah, I think it's kind of like I don't know. I mean, imagine any other kind of thing that we could do where we just do it all in secret and then we show up at a meeting and say, "Oh, here's what we got.
Yeah.
Vote on it. We're done."
Right.
I don't think that was like a specific ruling from the state that said that. I think it was just like the general understanding of how we saw the open meeting
Public
law.
meetings and yeah, okay.
I mean, I know like, emails count. Like if you're replying all to everyone with an opinion of something under our jurisdiction, that counts as a deliberation. So, I don't know. We might be able to find something specific, but I don't think when open meeting law was written, that I don't think people were using Google Docs to write things collaboratively. But that can be a problem for another day since it's 9:10 p.m. right now. If no one has any objections, I'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Well, actually, before I do, I'll just say, maybe in the future we can, I'll like, keep all these things in mind that we're talking about tonight and try to bring them up again in the future. If it seems like we have a light meeting or something, I think that's when we'll probably get the most done on these types of projects, or these types of other business. So, or if at any time someone wants to add it to the agenda, feel free to email Mitch to add one of these back to the agenda. So next on other business is any topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the posting of this agenda. I don't have anything. I'm guessing Mitch, you probably don't either.
Nope, nothing.
Okay. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. Enforcement updates. Mitch, any enforcement updates?
No updates.
And any project monitoring correspondence and site visit scheduling?
Just some site visit scheduling kind of stuff. That's on there. Just a reminder about Griswold, April 2nd. And then at Montague City Road, they were thinking Saturday, March 26th at 9 a.m. Does anyone have thoughts on that? That's this Saturday.
I already know I won't be around on this Saturday.
That would probably work for me. This Saturday. You're saying in the morning?
Yes.
Yeah. I could probably make that.
I think I probably could too.
I think I probably could too.
You double check.
Yeah. So yeah, that sounds good. You can go ahead and schedule that.
Okay, sounds good.
And that is the end of our agenda. Would anyone like to motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. And just which property was the site visit for this Saturday? The one you just scheduled?
Say, yeah, an RDA for it's at Montague City Road. I'll get the exact address and I'll email everyone.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
All right, we have a motion to adjourn by Rachel, seconded by Fletcher. Anyone opposed to the motion? Anyone abstaining? All right, then we are adjourned at 9:13 p.m. Thanks for sticking through all those items that I added to the agenda.
Everyone have a good night.
All right.
Hey.
Have a good night.
See ya.